Hello and welcome, dear students. Today we are going to discuss the topic Vedic education. The objectives of this lecture will be to develop a general idea about the ancient Indian educational system, particularly the Vedic system. Get familiar with the objectives and curriculum of Vedic educational system. Get an idea about the different castes and classes of people of Vedic age. Develop an understanding about the implications, the impact of Vedic educational system on the present educational system of India in terms of its aims and curriculum. Get familiar with the different methods of teaching and the organizational system of Vedic education in India. To understand the impact of Vedic education on the modern system of Indian education with special reference to methods of teaching and the organizational setup. Let us discuss in brief the historical background of this system of education. India evolved different systems of education during the ancient period in accordance with the changing needs of the time. Being considered as the great gift of the past, education in ancient India can be studied under three main periods, and these are 1. Vedic period, 2. Brahmanic period, and 3. Buddhist period. Let us now see what was the Vedic system of education. Vedic period starts from the birth of Indian civilization to near 1400 BC. The basis of Indian education and culture lies in Vedas, which are 4 in number. 1. Rig Veda, 2. Samveda, 3. Yajurveda, and 4. Athurveda. Though there are different opinions as regards the time of the rise of Vedas, but everybody admits the fact that they are the most ancient books of the world, and at the same time they are the original source of the philosophy of life of the ancient Indians. The study of Vedas enables one to get thorough knowledge not only of the philosophy of life but also of the whole fabric of ancient Indian culture. The term Veda has been derived from the word Vid, which means the knowledge. Vid is supposed to have its origin in 4 roots. 1. Vid Satyam, 2. Vid Vidalrilabhe, 3. Vid Vicharne, and 4. Vid Jnani. Vid Satyam is connotative of all those attributes and virtues which need to be cultivated by an individual for the procurement of the means required for the satisfaction of prime physical or material needs of human life, and also for the fuller development of one's personality. According to this Vid, the real glory of human life depends on the cultivation of individual power. Hence, in the first stage of celibacy of student life, which is called brahmacharya, an individual amazes materials useful for the next stage of life called grahastha, or the life of household. The brahmacharya stage of life contains the keynote of human life, and on it is based the dignity and the glory of future life. As such, Vid Satyam has been regarded as the key apparatus for the building up of life. The root Vid Vidalarbhi connotes that element in the universe which enables one to meet his temporal life with the supreme energy of benevolent and ultramundane existence. The enlightenment gained during the first stage of life helps the individual in the second stage, that is grihastha, to develop emotional attachment with the world and thereby obtain a glimpse of the divine cosmic soul. The third route, called vid vicharane, is indicative of intellectual and mental development of the individual. When a person tired and weary of the enjoyment of material comforts begins to feel depleted of strength during the grihastha, he needs to be replenished with power. Thus, in this stage, he is helped by his thoughts and ideas to develop a life of self-contemplation. The fourth route, that is Vidyane, gives a person knowledge of his inherent supreme perfection and redemption. An individual, on being initiated into the fourth stage of recluse, can, by his enlarged vision, gain the unbounded love of Almighty and thereby succeed in attaining the right of beatitude. We may thus conclude that the term Veda means knowledge of the ways and means of achieving spiritual progress in life. Therefore, the subject matter of Veda is Dharma and Brahma. Dharma is something that ensures our welfare, while Brahma is considered as the cause of creation. Now, let us discuss the aims and objectives of education. In Vedic period, education had an idealistic basis in which stress was laid on religiousness, spirituality, development of personality, character formation, and creation of an attitude for the development of a healthy society and nation. Vedic education stressed upon prominent aims of education such as 1. Physical development. People of Vedic age believed that a strong body has a strong mind, and this is the main doctrine of the present Gandhian educational system also. Thus, a strong body was considered to be necessary in the worldly as well as religious matters. For this purpose, a student has to remain a brahmachari up to the age of 25 years and lead a very regular, hard and disciplined life. Some used to receive education for even 32 years. During this period, some practical work like begging of alms, collecting firewood for Yajnikund, looking after animals, fellow beings of the ashram, and doing some agricultural work, which led to the physical development of a student. Second important aim is mental development. Mental or intellectual development took place simultaneously with physical development. Listening to Guru, thinking, discussing and meditation were essential for one's mental development. Possession of knowledge was considered absolutely necessary for one's mental development. Knowledge of the four Vedas along with the knowledge of Shruti and Smriti broadened the horizon of an individual. Third important aim is development of moral and spiritual faculties. Moral education affects the conduct of an individual. Mere moral instructions cannot improve one's conduct. Observance of celibacy was therefore considered necessary for good conduct. Religion has always played a dominant role in shaping the life of Indians, which is true even today. This was true in Vedic age as well. It's believed that education must be based on religion and spirituality in terms of its aims and content. Study of religion leads to moral and then to spiritual development. The teacher used to be necessarily a religious person, and the students also imbibed the same characteristics from his teacher. He sometimes superseded his teacher in religious matters and progressed in spirituality. Religion ruled supreme in Vedic education, and that is why spiritual atmosphere prevailed in the centers of education. Preaching, worship and meditation were necessary for the spiritual development of a student. The next aim is development of civic and cultural values. Vedic education believed that an educated person should perform his duties in different domains of life cooperatively and enthusiastically. Cooperation, brotherhood, patience and tolerance were therefore practiced by the students and the teacher in the Gurukuls or the ashrams. Typical culture and religious rituals were performed and observed by all inmates of the ashram. Preservation of culture through knowledge and skills was essential in Vedic education, which got transmitted automatically and naturally to the succeeding generations through the medium of school. The next aim is development of vocational efficiency. In Vedic age, every student was trained for the vocation he would follow in his future life, so that he might become a socially efficient and useful person. Agriculture and the crafts of life were practiced in the ashrams. The student would do all activities practically which formed the main life activity. This was accompanied by rearing of animals and birds, study of astronomy, knowledge of snakes and Vedas, dance, music and creation of fragrance were taught to develop vocational efficiency of the students. Next important aim is sublimation of instinctive tendencies. Vedic education believed that man is basically instinctive by nature. He is virtually a slave of instincts which are embedded in his psyche. When he gets obsessed by his senses, he often adopts the wrong path. The objective of education should therefore be to sublimate these instinctive tendencies in order to establish control over the innate and materialistic tendencies and center them upon the spiritual world. Next important aim, development of character. This was a very prominent aim of Vedic education. This development could be achieved through providing the students an appropriate environment of disciplined life. Vedic education aimed at developing the values of self-restraint, self-confidence, sympathy, cooperation, love and helpfulness for one's companions. Such a development would automatically lead to the development of a perfect personality. All these aims, to sum up, could be categorized as immediate and ultimate aims of education. Immediate aims would lead to the preparation of different castes of people for their actual life needs, while ultimate aims would prepare them for complete life in this world and the life beyond. Attainment of salvation was considered as the ultimate goal of education. Let us now go to the second part of the lecture, that is curriculum. Now, in Vedic period, the students were taught the 4 Vedas, namely Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda and the Athurveda. Dr. Mukherjee says, I quote, although the education of this period was dominated by the study of Vedic literature, historical study, study of heroic lives and discourses from the Puranas formed a part of syllabus. It took within its compass such subjects as spiritual as well as material knowledge from the Vedas, Vedic grammar, philosophy, knowledge of the absolute and that of the gods and ghosts, logic, ethics and conduct, arithmetic and geometry formed the core of curriculum. It is known for certain that the curriculum of Vedic education was according to the needs, interests and aptitudes of the students. All the same, it was different for the students belonging to 3 different castes. Say for example, Brahmins. The students of this caste were given special training in all branches of knowledge as they were expected to become teachers in their future life. For Kshatriyas, a Kshatriya student was given special training in warfare, politics and other related fields. Vaishya students were taught economics, trade, agriculture, industry and other related subjects. Let me tell you, Shudras as the 4th caste emerged later in the post-Vedic period. They were supposed to engage themselves in manual labor in agricultural fields, grazing of cattle, scavenging, etc. They were given education in these subjects only. Some of them learned music, dance, drawing, painting and other crafts. To sum up, the subjects which constituted the curriculum of Vedic education are Vedas and Vedic literature, which included Vedic grammar, rhetoric, logic, astrology, astronomy, spiritual and moral education, knowledge of snakes and devas. Second, theology and Puranas. Third, dharma, which is called the rule of conduct. Fourth, meditation and the rules and procedures involved in it. Fifth, professional or technical subjects. Sixth, arts and crafts. And seventh, physical education including dance and music. And the eighth one, recreation and creation of fragrance. Ninth, Vedangas, that was a synonym for all the above mentioned subjects taken together. These also included the study of Siksha, Kalpa, which is the rituals as given in the Vedas, Jyotisha, that is the knowledge of stars, Vyakarna or grammar, Nirukti, that is the etymological interpretation of words. It is said that the study of logic occupied a special place in the syllabus of Vedic education because knowledge of any other subject was tested on the basis of logic. Logic was regarded as the criterion for finding truth and untruth. Another specific thing about the curriculum of Vedic education was that along with education, the performance of certain rituals was considered essential. It was only after these rituals that the child would embark upon the subjects of his choice in future life. Let us now discuss in detail the methods of Vedic education. In Vedic age, education was primarily imparted through spoken word, that's orally. Before the Upanayan ceremony, which was known as initiation into the teaching and learning, the child had to learn the language and the occupation of the family, of course, informally. Rishis or sages used to educate the children in the family itself through this oral method. In the formal school, which was called Gurukul, the methods that were used for teaching were 1. Listening or Sarvana method. This method was based on listening to the teacher who recited Vedic hymns and verses with proper pronunciation and intonation. Students would copy the teacher who would give them enough drill. The medium of instruction, of course, was Sanskrit. Special care was taken of vowels, consonants, samasas, that's called the compound words, and sandhi or sandhis, that's the rules for joining of words. A recitation and hearing of hymns and Ved mantras was repeatedly practiced. It's on this account that Vedas were also known as Shrutis, which means a heard and repeated and committed to memory. Knowledge in Vedic period was not preserved in books and libraries, as printing had not come into existence. It was instead preserved in an individual, just like his blood, through the process of memorization. This method was called oral method and was usually meant for the students of average intelligence. For the gifted ones, other methods of teaching were used, such as deliberation method. This was also known as Chintan Manan method. It was a higher method of teaching and involved deliberations on the topic after careful thinking. Deep thinking or contemplation was called Manan and recollection was called Chintan. Free and frank discussion through question-answer technique would form a part of deliberations. Intellectual appreciation of the truth was possible through this method only. Meditation method was another important method. Meditation was required for realization of the truth, which is described as darshana or perception of truth. Compared to intellectual appreciation of the truth, meditation enables one to become conscious of only one object, that is the Brahma or the Creator or the God. The teacher instructs the child to continue the process of self-development and at the same time retain his identity with the Brahma. Next is illustration method. In Vedic education, the teacher used illustrations and similes as devices of teaching. Clarification of subject matter was made with the help of dishtant, that is, examples. It's believed that the modern maxims of teaching, like simple to complex, known to unknown, concrete to abstract, and empirical to rational, were followed by the teachers of Vedic period also. Next method is project method. This method was adopted only in certain situations. For example, the Kshatriya and the Vaishya students had to adopt practical projects in the form of warlike feats and industrial arts. Their training was quite essential for the success in life. Now, two important considerations and specific characteristic features of Vedic education are number 1, individualized instruction, and second, monitorial system. The individualized instruction technique was used while teaching, wherein each pupil was taught separately. This technique is considered to be psychologically sound even today. Unlike the classroom system of modern age, every student received individual attention from the teacher in Vedic period. Though there was no scope for competitiveness among the students, but still we find that some students would excel and could compete with others, which was possible due to individual attention. The monitorial system, which was invented for the first time in Vedic period, had its roots in the availability of competent and efficient senior students who would take care of the junior ones and could replace their teacher in his absence. This system made the monitors responsible, well-behaved leaders in the school and later in the society. Let's now take up organization. In Vedic period, there was no such administrative and organizational setup as obtains today. Education was an individualized effort. It was restricted to Brahmins only, though later it was extended to the other two castes, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. In all cases, it started from home, where sages would teach the child the language of the family and the ancestral occupation, as I said earlier. They also taught him certain religious rituals. Gurukul was the first and the last formal institution of education in ancient times, which in the later Vedic age took the form of an ashram. After the child learned the language and the occupation and traditions of the family informally, he was initiated into formal education and was sent to the Gurukul, which is the house of Guru. Gurukul was the summum bonum insofar as the institutional and organizational structure is concerned. The other two similar types of institutions were Rishikuls and Acharyakuls, which functioned without any direction and guidance from the society. Organizers, managers, and administrators of the present type were totally non-existent. Formal education started with the Upanayan ceremony, which was the initiating ceremony. It was not compulsory in the beginning for receiving formal education in the Gurukul, but later in the post-Vedic period, it became compulsory. Now, the etymological meaning of Upanayan is to take one near or to come near. In the context of education, this word meant that the student should come near or should be brought near the teacher for receiving education. In the post-Vedic period, this ceremony became so important that it was usually regarded as the second birth of an individual. Thus, Brahmins began to be called Dvij, that is, the twice born or born again. The two births signified the physical birth and the spiritual birth. On the occasion of Upanayan ceremony, the Guru or the preceptor used to give to the boy his mantra or the advice, and his spiritual life began from this point. This means that from this day and time his education started, which ultimately led to his spiritual development in the due course of time. On this occasion, only the parents of the child would be present and none else. So, no administrator, no organizer, no supervisor, and the like. The parents would give some gifts or some money to the teacher at this time, which was called samidha. The preceptor or the teacher, by making a pious resolve before a sacrificial fire in presence of the parents, established with the people a material as well as spiritual contact. Henceforth, it was the responsibility of the Guru to provide a living place, that's called the habitat, food, clothing, etc. to the student. The student became a part of his family and thus would be fed, nursed, and protected by the teacher in all respects. In return, the child would do everything at the command of the teacher. There was no uniform rule for the duration of education, but it's certain that education would normally start from the age of 8 to 12 years and would continue up to the age of 36 years. On the basis of the period of education, the students were divided into three categories. 1. Those obtaining education up to the age of 24 years, they were called Vasu. Second, those obtaining education up to the age of 36 years would be called Rudra. And third, those obtaining education up to the age of 48 years would be called Aditya. After receiving education for 12 to 24 years, the child would leave the Gurukul and enter domestic life. Some meritorious and capable students would continue to remain there and adopt the profession of their teacher. Next is administration. There was no formal administrative and supervisory system as we find today. But at the same time, the system of education was well organized and was considered supreme in the contemporary world. The content, the methodology, and other related matters were so effective that even the present time managers and organizers of the most advanced systems of education admire the ancient Indian educational system. Self-imposed restrictions on the part of all concerned made the system most disciplined and thus effective. Total educational system was organized and managed jointly by the parents, the teachers, and the students, while major role in managing the system was played by the teacher. In later Vedic age, we find that some devoted and sincere community members would be associated by the teacher in managing the ashram's affairs. Now, another related part of the organizational administration of education is certification and convocation. There was no formal examination and certification system in Vedic education. Success in real life situations was the test of one's efficiency and overall effectiveness of education. After receiving education for 12 years or more, the students used to assemble near the teacher for blessings before going home. The teacher, on this occasion, used to give some pieces of advice for happy and smooth running of the future life of students, that is the household or the grihastha, how to take care of the society and the nation, and how to serve the humanity as a whole. This was done by the teacher in a ceremony which was known as Samavartan Samaroha. That's like the modern convocation. The life and education of children would be quite economical, as the living and dietary habits would be simple and non-luxurious. A rearing of milch animals, growing of food crops and vegetables around the ashram would serve as a supplementary economic resource. Begging of alms and receipt of samidha and dakshina from the community were the main sources of income. The system was therefore devoid of budgeting and allocation of funds from any government of the type of present times. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching this lecture.